Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart. And you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up. And shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. You can't see this at home, but it's really nice to see how many people are saying the Shema along with us when we're doing that. The name of today's message is called, Do You Have Stuff Enough? All right, and today I'd like to talk about something that it may be a new subject for some of us, or at least a new way of looking at the subject. And I would like to talk today about an abundance mentality. All right? Do you have any idea what an abundance mentality is? You know, we were talking about some of this stuff during Torah study today, and I told you that it's always kind of interesting the way you guys wind up getting into the message before I even tell you what it is. An abundance mentality is a way of looking at things, a state of mind, if you will, where one is able to see and recognize all of the abundance and opportunities provided by Yahweh, which are in their world and all around them in their lives. That's a cool thing to have. From food to finances to love and relationships, to clothing and shelter, to their contact and their walk with Yahweh, whatever you can name. And though it certainly is a positive way to approach life, it's not the same thing as positive thinking. An abundance mentality expects to see and recognizes the abundance everywhere. The abundance mentality also creates a byproduct which is called shalom, or peace. An abundance mentality is thankful to Elohim for all the abundance. An abundance mentality likes stuff, but it is not concerned with the acquisition of stuff. Right? It knows that Yahweh provides what? Stuff. Yahweh provides stuff. Everything, yeah. And since the stuff comes from Yahweh in the first place, the abundance mentality is glad to love Yahweh with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. Now, that word might there, when we say the Shema, all right, is the Hebrew word meod. And it means, according to Brown Drivers Briggs' definition here, exceedingly much. That's not what you're thinking about when you think about might. Exceedingly much. Might, force, abundance in the substantive sense. Muchness, force, abundance. Exceedingly, great, very. All right? With muchness. In other words, not just your strength, but with everything you have. Your resources or stuff. All right? An abundance mentality has no problem sharing in the abundance and giving it to others and giving back to Elohim. You know why? Because the abundance mentality knows that Yahweh's in control, and it serves Him because His goodness is without end. Amen. All right. Now, I also want to talk about something today called a scarcity mentality. A scarcity mentality is a way of looking at things where one's focus tends to be not on the abundance, but rather on all the areas in their life where they're lacking and do not have stuff. It sees everything as a zero-sum game in which there's a finite amount of resources, and you better get what you can while you can, because once you miss it, it's going to be gone and you can't get it back. The scarcity mentality has a tendency to put the acquisition of stuff ahead of many things, all right? Some of which are relationships and taking care of others, and certainly not loving Yahweh with all that stuff. It just happens that way. A scarcity mentality never has enough. All right? Let's look for just a moment at Proverbs chapter 30 and see if this says positive things about a scarcity mentality. All right? Let's look at Proverbs 30. We're going to be on page 754 in the 1998 ISR translation. Proverbs chapter 30, we're going to start reading in verse 11. Proverbs 30, verse 11. There is a generation that curses its father and does not bless its mother. There is a generation clean in its own eyes, but not washed from its own filth. There is a generation, oh, how haughty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. Verse 14. There is a generation whose teeth are swords, and whose jaw teeth are knives, to devour the poor from the earth, and the needy from among men. The leech has 2 daughters. Give, give. 3 are not satisfied, 4 that never say enough. The grave, the barren womb, soil that not satisfied with water, and fire which never says enough. An eye that mocks his father and scorns to obey its mother. Ravens of the wadi dig it out, and young eagles eat it. Wow. That strikes mighty close to this generation, doesn't it? Now, it describes a generation with an attitude of entitlement and a scarcity mentality. All right? And with what does it describe them? Leeches, the grave, a barren womb, soil which is never satisfied with water, and fire which never says enough. And it can cause a lot of problems, like crows. It can cause a lot of problems. It reminds me of this story. There were these 2 old men who were just about to tee off at this really swanky golf resort when this young woman came walking up to one of the old men and gave him a great big kiss. And she said, I'm going to lay by the pool, and then I'll see you upstairs in the room later. And she walked away, and the other old man said, who in the world was that? Your granddaughter? He said, no, that's my wife. The first old man said, she's 27 and I'm 77. 77 and 27, his friend couldn't believe it. How did an old geezer like you get a young, beautiful woman like that? It was easy. The old man replied, I lied about my age. Lied about your age? His friend was flabbergasted. You're 77 years old. How could you lie about your age? Easy, he said. I told her I was 97. Now, it was a scarcity mentality that caused both the young woman and the old man to make those kind of decisions. You see, they're both going to be miserable. And if this fellow lives to be 97, they're both going to be miserable for a long time, amen? All right. But the Scripture reveals much to us about these 2 different mentalities and which one serves Yahweh in the way that He wants to be served. All right. Now, we've talked in the past about the sin of Adam and the sin of Hawa. All right. We've got a sermon called Oldest Trick in the Book. All right. But let's look at the next person to sin in the Scripture and see if we can discover what the root of his problem was. Genesis chapter 4. Bereshit chapter 4. Bereshit chapter 4. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Genesis or Bereshit chapter 4 verse 1. And Adam knew Hawa his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have gained a man from Yahweh. And again she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel became a keeper of sheep. But Cain became a tiller of the ground. And it came to be in the course of time that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Yahweh. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Yahweh looked to Abel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering. And Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. All right. Now I see two distinct mentalities here. All right, a scarcity mentality and an abundance mentality. Abel had an abundance mentality and knew that he needed to give the first to Yahweh. Right? There's no need for him to hold back for himself. Yahweh provides. All right? Yahshua called Abel righteous. All right? Cain, on the other hand, has a scarcity mentality and grubbing the best for himself. And when Yahweh doesn't look on Cain's put Yahweh second offering, you get that? Put Yahweh second offering, Cain becomes angry, but Yahweh calls him on it. Verse 6. And Yahweh said to Cain, why are you wroth? And why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? In other words, if you put me first, like you're supposed to be doing, won't you be accepted? Continuing on. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. And Cain told Abel his brother, and it came to be when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. So how did Yahweh handle this little problem? Well, he cursed Cain. Right? Verse 9. And Yahweh said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I don't know. Am I my brother's guard? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. So what seemed to be the root of Cain's problem? Some would say selfishness, but you see, selfishness is simply a symptom of a scarcity mentality. Right? Paul says in 1 Timothy that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Why? Because money buys stuff. Right? Cain's stuff came from his increase. Generosity is a symptom of an abundance mentality. An abundance mentality seemed to be something that Abraham's family would exhibit from time to time. Right? Let's while we're in Bereshit, look at chapter 13, Genesis 13. We're going to start reading in verse 5. And watch this. Genesis 13, verse 5. Now Lot, who was with Abram, Lot being his nephew, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And it came, and at the time of the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land. And Abram said to Lot, please, let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not all the land before you? Please, separate from me. If you take the left, then I go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I go to the left. And Lot filled his eyes and saw all the plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Mitzrayim as you go towards Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot moved east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram dwelling in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelling in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. All right? Abraham did not say, "Here, let me pick." You know? He said to Lot, "You pick. Plenty for everybody." See, Abraham had an abundance mentality. All right? Look at Genesis 26. Bereshit 26. We're going to start reading in verse 17, and it's going to be talking about Isaac here. Yitzhak. Verse 17, 26:17. So Yitzhak went from there and pitched his tent in the Wadi Gerar and dwelt there. And Yitzhak dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he called them by the names which his father called them. But when Yitzhak's servants dug in the wadi and found a well of running water there, the herdsmen of Gerar strove with Yitzhak's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. And they dug another well, and they strove over that one too, and he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not strive over it, and he called its name Rehoboth, and said, "For now Yahweh has made room for us, and we shall bear fruit in the land." Okay, so Yitzhak did what? He demonstrated an abundance mentality. Even Esau, Esau gets a bad rap. Well deserved. Esau gets a bad rap, but even Esau, when Yaakov returned, and he was offering Esau all of those gifts and everything, look at what both of them said. Genesis 33. We're going to start reading in verse 8. Genesis 33 and verse 8. Then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "To find favor in the eyes of my master." But Esau said, "I have a what? I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours." And Yaakov said, "No, please. If I have found favor in your eyes, then receive my present from my hand, because I have seen your face like seeing the face of Elohim, and you were pleased with me." All right, so we see that. And do you know who probably had the greatest abundance mentality of anybody in the Scripture? Yeshua. Yeah, he gave of his first fruits, but you know what? He actually gave all that he had, did he not? All right. Yahweh makes distinction between those who put him first and who have a scarcity mentality. Isaiah chapter 56. YHWH 56. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Isaiah 56, verse 1. Thus said Yahweh, "Guard right ruling and do righteousness, for near is my deliverance to come, and my righteousness is to be revealed. Blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who lays hold on it, guarding the Sabbath, lest he profane it, and guarding his hand from doing any evil. And let not the son of the foreigner who has joined himself to Yahweh speak, saying, Yahweh has certainly separated me from his people, nor let the eunuch say, Look, I am a dry tree." 56 verse 4. "For thus said Yahweh to the eunuchs who guard my Sabbaths, and have chosen what pleases me, and hold fast to my covenant, to them I shall give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. Also, the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahweh to serve him and to love the name of Yahweh, to be his servants, all who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and hold fast to my covenant, them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my altar, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples. The Master Yahweh, who gathers the outcasts of Yisrael, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him. All you beasts of the fields, come to devour all you beasts in the forest. His watchmen are blind, all of them. They have not known, all of them are dumb dogs, unable to bark, dreaming, lying down, loving to slumber. Okay, here comes the scarcity mentality. And the dogs have a strong appetite, and they never have what? Enough. And they are the shepherds, and they have not known understanding. All of them look to their own way, every one for his own gain, from his own end, saying, Come, let me bring wine and fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow shall be as today, even much greater. All right, so that's a scarcity mentality. And do you remember what it says in Revelation 22 about those who do not have the authority to enter into the city and of the tree of life? One verse here, you don't have to, John will write it down. Revelation 22:15 says, But outside are the dogs, and those who enchant with drugs, and those who whore, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and all who love and do falsehood. So, what do you want to be, a dog or a sheep? A sheep. Let me ask you this. When you think of sheep, okay, when you think of sheep, do you think of sheep who walk around frustrated and feeling deprived and disappointed and disillusioned and depressed all the time because the grass isn't green enough or soft enough, the latest variety of grass, closer to the stream which they expect to be sweeter than the last watering hole, with more shade and fewer wolves? Do they complain about all the walking that they have to do? And why can't the grass just be brought to us on carts so that we don't have to walk and we don't have to stoop low for what we get? And why can't it be the kind of grass that we like the most? And different kinds of grass on different carts. And water in lovely hand-painted porcelain bowls with all sorts of flavored water. And they ask for all this while they push and shove and try to hoard all that they can for themselves. That sounds like some very frustrated sheep indeed, doesn't it? Right? These sheep have a scarcity mentality. They never have enough. Right? Or do you, when you think of your sheep, do they tend to be content? Because they're just strolling around, sharing the grass, grazing wherever they like, sharing the water, drinking from the nearest stream, lying down in the grass to rest, and comforted without fear of harm because the shepherd's watching over them. All right? These sheep are at peace. They're not really frustrated at all. These sheep have an abundance mentality. Amen? All right? They have enough. That's the way that sheep actually tend to behave. All right? Perhaps, well, turn with me to the 23rd Psalm. This may be the reason that David compared his relationship with Yahweh as he does. Psalm 23, we're going to be on page 657. Psalm 23, verse 1. Yahweh is my shepherd, I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He turns back my being. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread before me a table in the face of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup does what? Runs over. Only goodness and kindness follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Yahweh to the length of days. Right? So, what kind of sheep are we? In the black or sheep that lack? For you young people may not know what that term means. In the black means in accounting terms that you have made a profit. If you're in the red, that means you have lost money. So, are we in the black or sheep that lack? Right? Do we really have the attitude that Yahweh is my shepherd, I do not lack? Yeah. Which comes from an abundance mentality because He takes care of all our needs. Right? Or are we restless and frustrated because of chasing after all sorts of things that can only bring temporary joy? Listen to this list and see if you can relate to being frustrated because you don't have the latest CD, the latest electronics, computers, programs, video games, televisions, a certain car, clothes, jewelry, cameras, makeup, guns, getting people to act the way that you want them to, houses, land, promotions, girlfriends, boyfriends, plastic surgery, musical instruments, Pat. It's on my list here. It's on my list here. Furniture. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Four-wheelers, redecorating, etc., etc., etc. I'm not talking about that we shouldn't have any desires and that we shouldn't set goals. See? I'm talking about having a scarcity mentality where one fails to be satisfied and can never have enough stuff. Always in pursuit of more stuff to have. Now don't answer out loud. Oh, there's none of you here that hadn't had something that you wanted to get. All right? Don't answer out loud, but ask yourself while listening to this very short list. Did you feel any anxiety when I read this list? Did you feel any anxiety? Were any of the things on your list of stuff, I meant to say list. Or any of the things that are on your list of stuff, on that list of stuff that I just mentioned? Or did you suddenly visualize something in your mind that you've been wanting with a sudden hope that it didn't get mentioned while I was going through this list? All right? Good. All right. If it makes you feel any better, it was easy for me to find stuff to put on my own list. All right? And no, it wasn't hairspray, Matt. But if we answered yes to any of those questions, then there are other questions that we need to ask ourselves. All right? Am I suffering from a scarcity mentality? If Yahweh's my shepherd, why do I feel like I lack? And am I in a constant pursuit of just more stuff? All right? If I could change my perspective to an abundance mentality, would I have greater appreciations for the blessings of Yahweh and the abundance in my life? All right? Could I be more useful to Yahweh and have more peace in my life? Turn with me to Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13. We're going to be on page 1172. We'll start reading in verse 5. Hebrews 13, verse 5. Let your way of life be without the love of money, and be satisfied with what you have. For he himself has said, I shall never leave you nor forsake you. So that we boldly say, Yahweh is my helper. I shall not fear what man shall do to me. And 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6. I'm going to start reading in verse 3. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 3. If anyone teaches differently and does not agree to the sound words, those of our Master Yahshua Messiah, and to the teaching which is according to reverence, he is puffed up, understanding none at all, but is sick about questionings and verbal battles, from which come envy, strife, slander, wicked suspicions, worthless disputes of men, or corrupt minds, and deprived of the truth, who think that reverence is a means of gain. Withdraw from such. But reverence with contentment is great gain. For we brought naught into the world, and it is impossible to take any out. When we have food and covering, we shall be satisfied with these. But those wishing to be rich fall into trial and a snare, and into many foolish and injurious lusts, which plunge men in ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some, by longing for it, have strayed from the belief and pierced themselves through with many pains. But you, O man of Elohim, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, reverence, belief, love, endurance, meekness. Fight the good fight of the belief, lay hold on everlasting life, to which you were also called, and have confessed the good confession before many witnesses. In the sight of Elohim, who gives life to all, and of Messiah Yahshua, who witnessed the good confession before Pontius Pilate, I charge you, that you guard the command spotlessly, blamelessly, until the appearance of our Master Yahshua Messiah, which in his own season he shall reveal. And blessed and only ruler, the sovereign of sovereigns and master of masters, who alone has immortality, dwelling in unapproachable light, whom no one has seen or is able to see, to whom be respect and everlasting might. Amen. All right. Well, speaking of that master, let's look at some of his words in Matthew 19. We're going to start reading verse 16, which will be on page 939. Matthew 19, and we're going to start reading in verse 16. And see, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? And he said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. And he said to him, Which? And he said, You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, respect your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man said to him, All these I have watched over from my youth, what do I still lack? And Yahshua said to him, If you wish to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. And come follow me. And when the young man heard the words, he went away sad, because he had many possessions. And Yahshua said to his taught ones, Truly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter into the reign of the heavens. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the reign of Elohim. And when his taught ones heard it, they were very astonished, saying, Who then is able to be saved? And looking intently, Yahshua said to them, With men this is impossible, but with Elohim all is possible. And then Kepha answering said to him, See, we have left all and followed you. What then shall we have? And Yahshua said to them, Truly I say to you, when the Son of Adam sits on the throne of his esteem, you have followed me in the rebirth, shall also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Yisrael. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or fathers, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life. But many who are first shall be last, and the last first. So, we see where a scarcity mentality can get in between us and Elohim, even if we're keeping the commands. Even if we're keeping the commands. I shared a message a few weeks back called It's a Miracle, where we talked about how if we expect to see miracles in our lives, that we will be amazed at the miracles that Yahweh's doing. Right? And no, it was not that He suddenly starts doing all kinds of things that we necessarily want, but there are many things that had we not been paying attention, we would have just taken for granted or not even noticed and missed the miracle altogether. Right? Some of you remember when I gave that message years ago for the first time, the very next week we were all able to tell about all these different miracles that had happened in our lives that we had witnessed as a result of paying attention. And we even started writing them down in the miracle book. All right? Just to keep a record so as to help us remember the things that we had seen. This message is not really very different. Only this one is becoming aware of the abundance in our lives. All right? And all the places where we can share the blessings because Yahweh can make more. Amen? Yahweh can make more. Matthew 13. We're going to start reading verse 3. Page 931. Matthew 13, verse 3. And he spoke to them much in parables, saying, See, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some indeed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell on rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered. And others fell among thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them. And others fell on good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear. And his taught ones came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? And he answering said to them, Because it has been given to you to know the secrets of the reign of the heavens, but to them it has not been given. For whoever possesses, to him more shall be given, and he shall have overflowingly. But whoever does not possess, even what he possesses shall be taken away from him. Because of this I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of YHWH, that be Isaiah, is completely filled, which says, Hearing you shall hear and by no means understand, and seeing you shall see and by no means perceive. For the heart of this people has become thickened, and their eyes are hard of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart, and turn back, and I heal them. And blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous ones long to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. You then, hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the reign and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is what was sown by the wayside, and that sown on rocky places is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but is short-lived. And when pressure and persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. And that sown among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the worry of this age and the deceit of, what's that next word? Riches choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. And that sown on the good soil is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. And I like the way that it puts it in Luke, just two verses here, Luke 8:14 and 15. It says, And that which fell among thorns are those who, when they have heard, go out and are choked with worries and riches and pleasures of life, and bring no fruit to perfection, and that on the good soil are those having heard the word with a noble and good heart, retain it, and bear fruit with endurance. And I want to look at one other thing that YHWH said here. Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25. I'm going to start reading in verse 13, so we will be on page 947. Matthew 25:13. Watch therefore, because you do not know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Adam is coming. For it is like a man going from home who called his servants and delivered his possessions to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, and to another 2, and to another 1, and to each one according to his own ability, and he went from home. And he who had received the 5 talents went and worked with them, and he made another 5 talents. I would say he probably wasn't worried about losing those talents, was he? He had an abundance mentality. Make more. In the same way, verse 17, he with the 2 also, he gained 2 more. But he who had received the 1 went away and dug in the ground and hid the silver of his master. You see where this is going? After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. And his master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You were trustworthy over a little. I shall set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So far, it looks like the master appreciates people having an abundance mentality and using it to serve him more. All right? Verse 22. Then he who had received 2 talents came and said, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You were trustworthy over a little. I shall set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one who had received the 1 talent also came and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And being afraid, I went and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. See, he really didn't serve the master. He was really serving himself. He was worried about preserving himself, is what he was worried about doing. Verse 26. And his master answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. Then you should have put my silver with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to him who possesses 10 talents. For to those who possess, more shall be given, and he shall have overflowingly, but from him who does not possess, even what he possesses shall be taken away. And throw the worthless servant out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You see, Yahweh doesn't need your time, he doesn't need your money, and he does not need your stuff. All right? What he needs is to see that our lives are centered on him. All right? He doesn't need your time, he doesn't need your money, and he doesn't need your stuff. All right? After all, he's the one that gave it to you in the first place, isn't he? All right? What he wants is to see that the relationship with our time and with our money and with our stuff is less important to us than the relationship that we have with him and the relationship that we have with our neighbors. Right? Actually, that is what he wants. What we need, not want, but need, is for him to see that the relationship with our time and our money and our stuff are less important to us than the relationship that we have with him and with our neighbors. Amen? Because without that, our eternal lives are at risk. I mean, didn't we just read that? All right? Our eternal lives are at risk. I find it entertaining that when we say the word abundance, that the first part of the word is the Hebrew word for father, ab. The first word that we say when we say scarcity is what? Scare. All right? Ironically, the scarcity mentality seems to be full of fear and anxiety, while reliance on our Heavenly Father is full of abundance and shalom. All right? Is the glass half empty, or is the glass half full? Neither. The glass is twice as big as it needs to be. All right. It is at least twice as big as it needs to be. Are you trying to carry a bigger glass than the one that Yahweh has presented you with? Okay? If the answer is yes, then you will never be full of His blessings. But if we put Him first, all right, and live of the abundance that He so freely gives us, and carry the glass that Yahweh has given us, we'll be like David in the 23rd Psalm, where he said, "You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over." All right? May we all gain an abundance mentality where we can see all the blessings in our lives. Gratefully giving Yahweh the first fruits of all our stuff, and putting Him first in all that we do and have. And ask yourselves, are you like the Proverbs 30? Leeches, the grave, the barren womb, the soil that never has enough water, and fire which never says enough? Or do you look around and see all the abundance and say, praise Yahweh, my cup runs over and I have stuff enough? Yevrakeka Yahweh ba'ish bareka ya'er Yahweh panavaleka vikaneka yasa Yahweh panavaleka viasem lakash shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you, give you His complete contentment.